Back in 1992, I was 17 years old and spending my first summer training and competing in France. At this time, the Nice Triathlon was the second most prestigious event on the calendar behind the Hawaiian Ironman, and it attracted some of the best athletes from all over the world. For example, Mark Allen is a 10-time champion at this race. The event itself consisted of a 4K swim in the Med, 120k mountainous bike in the Alps Maritimes behind the French coastline, and a 32k run out and back dead flat along the Promenade des Anglais. I'd successfully raced quite a few half Ironmans in Australia previously, so whilst the distance was further than I'd done in the past, I felt I'd be able to cope without any issue. I remember the start and standing on the line at the front being petrified that I'd trip and get run over by about 100 people behind. It was really chaotic, and if you look closely you can see the start tape getting caught up in amongst the athletes, so I've no idea how no one drowned in this start. It really was scary. Once we got clear, it was a quick swim. Wolfgang Dietrich, who was a multiple race swim leader in the Hawaii Ironman, led the field with Rob Mackle and Robin Brew, two other fantastic swimmers, on his feet. I'm here in the orange wetsuit, and for most of this video it doesn't look like I'm doing a great job of drafting. Looks like I'm just sat off the back of it for most of the swim. I think I did get on for the most part. I also remember thinking about 3k into this swim that it was really long and just wishing that it was over, because 4k in a race is a long way. Here we are just about to exit, and again, I'm not doing a great job here. I'm just dropped off the back. I probably lost a bit of concentration around the last buoy. Really steep clamber up the stones and into transition. And as you'll see, as we come in, transitions were really different back in those days. You could ride out of and back into transition. So thankfully that rule doesn't exist anymore, because it was pretty dangerous. This is Yves Cordier, and he was the local favourite. So he was just behind me out of the water, and as you can see coming up, he rode really aggressively to get to the front of the race. He was a great cyclist, and he also, living in Nice, he trained on these roads, so knew them really well. I think I was leading at this point, and he was just pushing hard on the flat to get to the front of the race as we hit the first climb. He was a great swimmer, great biker, but not the best runner. So he knew that he needed a lead off the bike. I also remember Dietrich shouting at me as we were going up the first climb and dropping him that this isn't a short course, because he thought that we were going far too hard, and probably thinking that I was a young idiot. But Cordier and I did ride really hard. The hills around Nice aren't super steep, so you can get a good rhythm going. I still look like I'm probably pushing too big of a gear, and I don't know why I'm riding a disc. I think that's all I had. But I think after about 60k through the ride, we'd put 5 minutes into Mike Pig. So we were really going for it. And I remember thinking, wow, we're pushing hard here. There was no let up. At one point, we had 14 minutes on Mark, and I think had Yves been able to sustain that 14-minute gap, even 12 minutes, he probably would have gone on to win the race. But Mark pulled a little bit back in the last 30k or so. I was really inexperienced at descending, so I just stuck close to Yves on the downhills and tried to follow his lines as much as possible. But I remember a couple of times where I got caught out by a hairpin. You know, you're going pretty quick here, 60, 70k an hour, and then you come into an unexpected hairpin. And I remember throwing out the anchor just to try to stop before going off the edge. But my biggest mistake was to not take any form of nutrition with me on the bike, not even any energy drink in my bottle. At the briefing, they'd said that the aid stations on the bike would be handing out energy drinks, bananas, muesli bars, etc., etc. And I was just planning on relying on that. But Eve and I were about 10 minutes ahead of the schedule they'd planned. So every time we went through an aid station, there was nothing ready. And after about 50k, I knew that I was in big trouble, but it was too late to do anything about it. And Eve obviously knew that this was going to be a risk, and he'd taken food with him. And I'm pretty sure he picked up some stuff along the way from people he knew. So he was okay, but I was running on absolutely nothing. At around 90k of the bike and just cresting the penultimate climb, I started to get blurry vision, and that was the end of things. I blew spectacularly on the following climb. You can see Dietrich going past me there. On that climb, I was losing about a minute every 500 meters to Cordier, and by the time I got back into Nice, I was around about 12 minutes behind Yves. Mark finished the bike 10 minutes down on Yves, and it was a really exciting race because Yves, whilst not being the greatest runner, he could run, a really strong, solid pace. So Mark was going to have to produce a really big run to win it. This is Mike Pigg coming in, and Mike must have been second or third off the bike. Again, fantastic runner. The interesting thing with this is, as you'll see, the next guy coming in off the bike is Mark. I think Rob Burrell was in front of Mark at this point in time, but Mark came in, and you'll see he just isn't rushed. And you see him coming up here as he's running out. He's not pushing. He's just letting himself ease, and he knows he's got 32k, and he's not panicked. And he just built through the run, built his pace throughout the run. I came into transition about 12 minutes down on Yves, and I remember running out thinking, there's no way on earth I'm getting back to here. I was completely gone. I got to the first aid station on the run, and I just absolutely gorged myself to try to get some energy back into my system. But after about 500 meters of running, after the aid station, I threw it all back up, and I had nothing in my system, and I knew that I was done. And I don't remember much after that, but this is me at 14k, and I somehow made it to 14k. I don't know how, but then I was gone. I collapsed, and I ended up in a Nice hospital. I was fine. I just had no energy. 2 weeks later, I won the Alpe d'Huez triathlon against Yves, and I drove home in the car I won, so I was absolutely fine. But whilst I was in the back of an ambulance, Mark was doing his Pac-Man impression, and unfortunately for Yves, he got caught within 1 kilometre of the line. I remember hearing Mark ran the last 3k in about 9:15, so it was really impressive. I look back on this race with a lot of fondness. It might not have worked out for me that day, but I had a lot of fun, and I learned some lessons that stick with me to this day when I'm coaching. Namely, there are 2 things you need to get right on a long course race day: pacing and nutrition. If those 2 things go well, you'll have a good day. If you get either of them wrong, and well, you saw what happens.